Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Administrative Committee meeting. It's been a minute since we've been here for this one. And our first item up on the agenda is approval of committee meeting minutes from May 9th.
It took a while to remember and go through, but yes, they look good. I think we should approve them.
I agree. I thought the same. So item number 2, Bootzer's outdoor concert alcohol use request in the entertainment district. Hello, Amanda.
Good afternoon, everyone. So per standard operating procedures with Community Events Division and requests for alcohol, Bootzer's Coffee House and Pub is hosting an outdoor concert on Friday, August 12th. And in your packets is a draft resolution as reviewed by legal, as well as the approved community event. So this event was approved by staff May 20th, but due to some cancellations and vacations and the like, we're here today requesting the temporary suspension of the open container law. This is a little bit of a unique situation in that the host is actually also the beer/wine license vendor. And so we've been working with Pat Greenfield just to go over all the particulars. And then the event footprint itself is right at the corner of 2nd Street and won't extend fully to 1st. It will extend just before to leave that Zion's Bank driveway open. So it's a little bit, not quite a block. But we recommend approval of the resolution and are happy to answer any questions. And the applicant is also here if you have any questions for her.
My only question, and I'm all for it, so don't worry. It's not that. But I'm looking ahead, since this is still a relatively new thing that we're doing with the entertainment district. And we have so many great places around downtown. Do you and your staff have like a checkoff list for when this might not happen? I mean, because I always worry about, if we say no to someone, they'll be like, but everyone else gets to do it. Why can't we? So how's that process?
So community event applications are first come, first served. And really, it would only be in the event if like 2 applicants were requesting the same area at the same time. So we have, in fact, I believe that almost happened last year around the first Mosktoberfest. There were a couple of different competing events. And of course, as council knows, this goes to several different departments. And so part of that is also resources. So Moscow Police Department is most affected by this. So if there were several other events permitted for that day, all in different locations, but needing police services, that could be something that might inhibit or hinder someone's event application, in which case we would make that clear. But they are first come, first serve.
Okay. I appreciate that, because I just got so excited about it when it first came up that I kind of forgot about that logistical part and just wanted to know the thought process on that.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
I have some questions too, and I'm with Sandra. It's fine. I'm just trying to figure out how this works because we're all new to it. So do you think it was the intention to have I thought at first that the intention was for these big events where we close down all of downtown to have the open container permit, but do you think it's in keeping with the intention to have it in such a small area, not even a block?
Yes, I do. I believe part of this was to not have the need for, as Councilmember Kelly has put it, have people in beer jail, right? So this allows parents and children to stay together, to enjoy the event together, and roam around. So I think it is well within the intention. And of course, this is just in the downtown corridor. So any events that are still requesting alcohol outside the downtown corridor still need to work with those restrictions of having a designated beer garden. So we were working through a request like that with the Unitarian Universalist Church for their grand reopening. I think they have decided that is too much work for them, so they won't be pursuing the beer garden in the public right-of-way. But that is something that we continue to work with folks outside that entertainment district and downtown corridor.
Councilor Parker, if I could add to that, yeah, I agree that this was the intent as the program was developed when we looked at renewing and redoing our closure plans for downtown. We very intentionally set up a friendly fee structure that would facilitate these types of smaller block closures, so that the alternative for somebody wasn't all or nothing, so that you could have some smaller events and make it more available with with vibrancy being one of the real goals for our downtown, having vibrancy and things happening. So it would allow for some flexibility for different sized events that would still have things that made downtown a vibrant gathering place.
Great, thanks.
And we do have on the books, I believe in 2015, Bootsers and Mingles did a small, similar size block party type event. And then, of course, that beer and wine was restricted to the beer garden area within that event footprint. So.
Thank you.
I actually had one last question. Do we anticipate always providing police services, even as this becomes something that isn't new?
That's a great question. I know Chief Fry's in the audience, and I could invite him up to speak to that if he'd like, or I can speak on his behalf.
There he goes. Hi, Chief Fry.
Hello. So what we do when we get the applications, we review where it's at, if we've had it in the past, and we can either provide, usually the first year I have officers there, and then if we see that it goes good, they can bring in a private security, a lot of times like we do up in the park, East City Park and stuff. But we kind of make that call depending on, how big is the event. If the event's really big, usually we'll have police services there.
Great. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Councilor Zabal, that's consistent with the way that we've operated in the past with things like Rendezvous in the Park. It's and the council, when the council first passed the ordinance for the downtown entertainment district, the idea was that we would give it a little time, see how it went, and then the council could revisit that and decide if there were regulations that they wanted to take a look at altering.
And then in the case of if police are unavailable, it would be a requirement of the applicant to seek outside security services. So that happened with the Cornhole for a Cause event where police services just didn't have the personnel and they worked with outside security.
Thank you.
I'm all in favor of approving. That's the end of questions.
I agree. And I think consent agenda.
Yep, that's fine with me.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. So I'll preface this by saying I hope I pronounce it correctly. Item number 3, Deutschman Portable Collection Proposal with Megan Cherry. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for your time today. This is a really exciting another chapter in our story about donations to the City of Moscow Public Art Program. This time we're looking at a donation proposal for the portable collection. So I want to take a minute to just give everybody a really quick refresher about the portable collection. This is the oldest component of the City of Moscow Public Art Program. This started in 1985 with an artwork that is actually no longer in the collection. But so now the one that's in existence, that's the oldest in the collection, is an Alf Dunn print that's slated for reframing here in the next month or so. But so this is one of the longest standing pieces of our public art efforts. We have 96 individual works. We've got some multi-work series. Some of you might remember the series of architectural models of historic buildings in downtown Moscow that came in as a donation in 2021. So that number 96 encompasses those as individual pieces. And I always really like to think about representation as well. So I went through and for the first time actually this morning and count that we have 71 individual artists represented in the collection. And that's important. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along here. But what you see on the right-hand side are two recent accessions into the collection, and we add to the collection in a variety of ways. Again, I'll mention some points about that in a minute. But that's the kind of snapshot of the portable collection, and also wanted to address a few questions that people have asked quite frequently about this feature. The collection, where is the collection? They're like, is there a storage spot? Where is it? It's actually all of the collection is displayed in city public areas and offices, unless it is, as we've got some pieces are cycling through a reframing process right now, but it's all on display in public areas of the city. Why is the collection important? I think the answer to the first question also answers the second question. This collection is important because it makes the spaces that the public inhabit and also city staff inhabit, it makes them beautiful. I will say that there are staff members who are very, very attached to the works that are in their offices. I have a special color coding system that lets me know when a piece is one that is not Tyler's smiling because he has one. Yep, he's got one like that.
You know about the duck, you know.
Yeah, there's some real favorites, and I think that's important not just because it makes city staff happy, although that's a big priority. It also that's something that members of the public can see when they visit city staff offices. But it's also that kind of joy pervades the work that we do, and it's also, I think, important that we have a collection of works that represent the artists in this area. This proposed donation would add to that scope of 71 artists in a couple of really important ways. So the collection typically grows on a regular basis through accessions, through Art Walk. The Art Walk program is a really, let's see, I think we've got 13 pieces that we've brought into the collection from that program. Palouse Plein Air, we choose a work from Palouse Plein Air every year. Recently, Farmers Market implemented an update to their poster opportunity where we bring in an original artwork from that to the collection. So we're building a Farmers Market Originals collection as well. And then also we've seen several donations come in. And so that's how this collection grows. Anytime we look at collection growth, I also think about maintenance and conservation. This year we've taken on a pretty focused effort to repair some artworks. I just got in a print a second print of a photograph we had today that had some sun damage. And then we're also doing a lot of reframing. And so there is some, there's some maintenance and conservation that we have to think about anytime we bring an artwork in. But I think we avoid those conservation moments when we're careful about where we put artwork and make sure that staff that is responsible for displaying the work is aware of some, just ways to avoid that damage.
I have a weird question for you on that. Do you have to have any kind of special permission from the artist or maybe just the artist, if possible, if you want to change the frame? Because I know some artists are really like, don't put my picture in that kind of frame. It's awful.
There is, I'm searching my memory banks. We were just looking at this language in our gifted art agreement template about, reframing being part of a standard maintenance. There are some artists who present their work in handmade frames, and I would probably be sensitive to that. But if the frame is it's structural.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking about reframing, a lot of times it's about getting a glass spacer between a glass and the artwork, or putting museum or conservation glass in front of the piece. So it, for UV protection. So in that case, I'm not worried about it. A lot of times too, we'll see artworks come in that a lot of time and effort has been invested in the making of the artwork, but the frame it's not custom framing, and you can, because that's challenging, right? So in that case, if I'm looking at a sort of a mass-produced frame, there's a bit of a judgment call there, but I'm not assuming that the artist is going to be upset if I swap that out for custom framing. But I do try to respect the artist intent when it comes to, the color and, yeah.
That's cool. I appreciate that. That was a weird thing, but I've heard that from more than one person.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Not about what is going on here, but just their artwork in general.
Yeah. Framing it's a big deal, but we've been fortunate to do a lot of repair and updates on framing in the collection this year. Okay, so for this particular donation proposal, I wanted to take a minute to talk about the donors, which overlap with the artists, and it's a very it's an exciting group of people here that are really deeply rooted in Moscow culture. Familiar names up there on the screen. So the donors are Phil and Sandra Deutschman. Phil taught physics at U of I. Sandra taught art ed at WSU. She also got her MFA from U of I. And they lived here in Moscow for quite some time. And they have recently gone to their second retirement home in Eugene. In that downsizing process, they identified a few collections that they would like to place some of their collection in, and ours is one of them. They are working with Kelly Thurman, who's also somebody who has been around Moscow and still makes the rounds through here. But for decades, she was part of the early part of the start of the portable collection and market. So a lot of connections there. What the donation proposal is a work by Sandra and then a work by George Ray. Both of these artists are people that we do not have represented in our collection at this point. So I think that does speak for the importance of at least considering bringing those in. The size of the pieces are something to consider. I provided the dimensions there. The piece on the right, Origins, is very large, and it's a piece that we will want to have a more or less permanent location for. So that proposed location is here in finance. Because it is prominently visible from that water billing window, this piece, the strength of it visually makes it perfect for that longer viewing distance. Also, that spot is great in terms of it's above head height. So it's going to be really safe for that artwork. Also, importantly, it aligns with the taste of the folks in finance, and that's really important. So the other piece, the George Ray piece, there's a thought about putting that on the outside of the water billing window on the right side between the box gallery and the water billing window. Close proximity to my office so I can make sure it's plugged in and up and running every day. And also, there's a social side to curating and having two friends. These are two people who have been friends for decades, and they both really loved the idea of their work being in proximity to one another. So with that, the MAC recommendation is to accept the portable collection donation, and staff heartily echoes that recommendation. And with that, I would love to take any questions.
I really love that you put in there that the finance people are happy with that, because that is huge. And that's a big piece of art in there. So, I mean, I think it looks good, but it's nice to know that they're not, that's going to drive me nuts, right? So I love it. I don't have questions. I just wanted to throw that out there. I love when we get new art in.
Great.
Yeah,
Pretty
it's
exciting.
great.
Yeah.
I'm happy to
Yay, let's do it.
put that on the consent agenda.
I know it's cool, and so I kind of want to talk about it again, but I think that's probably where it belongs.
Yeah, I think it belongs on consent. It is cool, but people will just have to go a little bit out of their way to come by and see, like, what is that? And that'll be great. So
Come and pay their water bill, see a nice piece of
yeah,
neon.
what is that?
It's about time we had some George Ray neon. It's very
Right?
exciting. Both of these artists are they're both really thrilled to have this experience.
Oh,
So
good.
thank you.
Thank you. Very exciting. Item number 4, proposed daycare code amendments with Katie Short. Hello.
You guys,
Welcome.
so I brought copies of the PowerPoint that
Oh,
we
gosh, thank you.
did in May. It's just a revised copy of
Nice.
what we had a couple of months ago prior to that. So there's a little bit of history on the first page. We started this conversation and revising the daycare code back in December of 2019. We were contacted by a daycare provider at the time who had some concerns about the child to staff ratio primarily, and increasing that so that way she could have more children in her daycare. because her wait list was super long. So she wanted to be able to serve more kids. So we started those conversations. We created a kind of a task force kind of thing where one provider, usually the director or manager of each of those facilities in a licensed facility in Moscow, came. We sat down and we talked about the issues in the current code, where they had their red flags and what they would like to see changed. From that, we kind of came up with this list, which has carried us to now. We had 2 of those meetings, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
So we put it on hold. We've had 2 public hearings since then, one in July of 2021, and then one in May, just 2 months ago. So at each of those meetings, we had input from community members, from parents, from the providers themselves, to propose those changes and give them a chance to voice their concerns about the proposed changes. And this is where we've come to. The first is that we wanted to take out a registered daycare facility. We we combined some of the sizes and decided that from 1 to 5 children in a facility, the state is covered. The state licenses those themselves. It doesn't require a license for them. So in order to be more consistent with the state code, we thought that that was kind of an appropriate change to make. The second one is that in our current code, we didn't have a minimum age that a provider could be. It's come up quite a few times, actually. And so we decided that because the scale goes from newborn to age 13 in child to provider ratios, age 14 was a really great age to start allowing people to work in the facility. And we do have people ask if a 14-year-old can work. So I actually had a 13-year-old come in the other day and I was like, sorry, too young. The next one, this is one of the biggest things that spurred this conversation to begin with. We decided that taking out the term admitted to when it came to misdemeanor drug and alcohol crimes was an appropriate change to make. That was mostly because what we see this most frequently when a person has an MIP, and we didn't feel that disqualifying someone from getting a provider's license if they made a mistake at 15, denying them until they're 20 was an appropriate consequence. So just taking out the admitted to part was the biggest thing in that section. Still keeping it in for all felony drug crimes, but not for misdemeanors. Same with the alcohol. We took out those disqualifying crimes.
Sorry, I'm not seeing admitted to. I mean, I don't understand.
So any violation, misdemeanor, or felony of the Uniform Controlled Substance Act is what it says now. And then in here we say this is what we want to change it to. The proposed change is just taking, I've got it, hang on.
Pled guilty, been found guilty, or received a withheld judgment.
Mm-hmm. And so in the current code, it also has admitted to in that section right
It's
there.
just not in here.
Right, because we're proposing this is our proposed.
That's not the full section.
Yeah.
That's just the blurb from it.
Okay,
I've got the code if you would like to read it.
I have it too. I just didn't understand what you were saying.
Removing alcohol. So currently, providers are required to have an infant CPR certification. We're going to keep that in order to stay consistent with the state, but also Currently, they're only required to have 4 hours of additional training per year. We wanted to increase that to 12. We just felt that more education wasn't a bad thing, and most of the daycares already have to have 12 hours of additional education every year because they are ICCP funded. So they're already meeting it most of the time.
Can you tell me, along with the infant CPR,
Mhm.
are they required to have an AED in their facility?
That's a really great question for Justin. I
Okay.
don't believe so. I haven't seen that. I know it's not on the checklist when we do
Okay.
our inspections,
Thanks.
but that's in the facility stuff, and that's Justin's
Sure. No,
domain.
that's okay. I just thought, oh, I heard CPR and that's the next step I go to. So I just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So probably the biggest change, the reason that this all came about was because of child to provider ratios. Currently, the ratio is convoluted. We've got 5 to 7-year-olds who are worth 0.83 points and 7 to 13-year-olds who are worth 0.66 points. So when you're standing in a room with 30 kids and a couple of providers and you're trying to count how much each kid is worth, it gets really confusing. And so that's on a 10-point scale. So what we're proposing is we move to a 12-point scale, that infants are worth, got it,
I was reading that earlier.
3 points. So 0 to 1 years old, they're worth 3 points. 1 to 3 years old, they're worth 2 points. 3 to less than 5, they're worth 1 point. 5 to less than 13, they're worth a half a point. So essentially, when you do the math in it, we're gaining 1 child additionally in each age group. And we thought that we're still being more restrictive than the state in this ratio combination, but we're allowing for 1 extra kid to help kind of provide relief to those parents who are trying to get their kids into daycares and help the daycares increase their amount of kids that they're having.
So how many daycares in Moscow allow infants? 0 to 1?
That's a very good question. I know that we have 13 daycares total. I know of at least 5 that I'm counting off the top of my head that have infants and have infant rooms. That's Palouse Early Learning Center, Site 1, Moscow Day School, Thrive Learning Center, and those 3. Little Lentils, and Miss Jenny's doesn't. So 4 off the top of my head, I can think of those 4. The majority of them are in that 3 to 5 age range because at 5 they usually go to school. So
Yeah. I just have some concerns about increasing the number of infants, and I know that the goal was to create more spaces, but really that only creates like 5 spaces in town and potentially puts a lot of kids at risk.
So we had a lot of conversations about that as well because that was one of our biggest concerns. And Justin, who he has been in every single one of those fire alarm trainings and everything like that for the daycares, and watching them and how a lot of those daycares, they have pregnancy brain. They have rolling crib that they put their 3 to 4 kids in. They'd have 4 kids, and that's how they are able to get them all out in fire drills and that kind of stuff. And so going from the 3 to the 4, it's not going to change how they get the kids out in those situations.
But that's not all they do.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
watching infants is more than getting them out in a fire.
hmm
Yeah. Okay.
So currently, when a provider gets a daycare license, they come in, they turn in their application, they get fingerprinted, they turn in their CPR and their training hours within the first 30 days. Under city code, it requires us to do a temporary licensing during those 30 days. That wasn't in practice really when I took over licensing. And while they're marked as a temporary license in my system, and they're not allowed to be unsupervised, it really was just kind of an obsolete part of the code that to help clean it up, we thought we would remove that because they're already meeting the requirements. It would just be a piece of paper. There's actually no definition for provider in the current code, so we just thought that we would include that, and defining a provider as a person who can provide unsupervised care to children once they have met the background CPR and training hour requirements outlined in this chapter and must renew their license every year.
And not to harp on just the CPR part, but does that also count first aid training on infants?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Yep.
Thanks.
The rest of it is pretty much we're just adopting state code in order to be consistent with them. As a city, we can't be less restrictive. We can just be more restrictive. So we wanted to include a definition of school-age children. Under vaccinations, our current code doesn't allow for religious, medical, or other exemptions, so we'd include those. Licensing, or in order to get your license and meeting the state standard on insurance purposes. And then creating a specific line in there that says parents and or guardians can have access to their children in a daycare at any time, unless otherwise dictated by a court.
It's like you read our minds there for a second.
And then lastly, the city we're just stating our requirements for backgrounds. And in this, we didn't have a exact definition for what it is to be on the premises of a daycare, and need to have a license. And so we're including in there that we're going to have that be 12 hours because that's the limit of a volunteer.
Okay.
Questions?
Any other questions on what's already been asked?
I'd like to know like how you use the public input process in changing some of the regulations.
Yeah, so we, like I said, in 2019, a daycare provider came to us, a couple of them actually, and wanted to start a conversation. So we held a public meeting. We put it out to all the daycares. We said, please contact your parents.
Mm-hmm.
This is your time to come voice your concerns about what the city code is. We advertised it the same way we do with all public hearings. That was actually a very large meeting. We had quite a few people come for that and express their initial concerns. And then from that point, we've done the same thing. Every time we've held a public hearing for public comment on the proposed changes, flyers have gone out to each of the daycares. They've been advertised like every public meeting. And we've asked providers to send it to their parent list and say, we are having this meeting, we're having these conversations about the proposed changes. Please let them know. We have quite a few parents, especially from Moscow Day School, who have been involved in this conversation. And so that's how we've put it out there to have public comment.
And then did you keep notes on the public comment? Do you know what kinds of public comment you got? And
Yeah.
And then And was that used in your final decisions about the changes?
Yes. Yeah. So, and
I've been to one meeting and
Yeah.
it seemed like the feedback was different than what's in the proposal, but we can't always do what people want.
Yeah. I think I had my emails printed out of our last meeting where we discussed all the concerns that were brought up during that meeting. And then Chief Fry, Anthony, Captain Dollinger, Mia, myself, Justin, and Corey from
Mhm.
Community Development, we've had extensive conversations after each of those meetings to see if the feedback that we had was consistent with what other things that we've been hearing as well.
Okay. It's just there's like the whole legal part of it, and then there's the changing or loosening some of the restrictions part of it. So it's like there's just a lot in the document.
Yeah, it was a very convoluted document to begin
To
with. Yeah.
The other thing I noticed, sorry, I can't find it now, was that if you have an in-home daycare, oh, here it is, group daycare facility, a daycare facility providing daycare for 7 to 12 children. And that's the smallest number that the city provides a license to, is that right?
Not currently. Currently, it's 1 to 5, and that's a registered daycare facility, which is what we're proposing taking out, and then having 6. Right, I think 6 would be where we start licensing as a family daycare facility.
So if you have less than 7 kids in your facility, you don't have to have a license.
Under what we're proposing. Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure I understood.
Yeah. A group daycare facility, a daycare facility providing daycare for 7 to 12 children is the smallest of what the city would be licensing. And currently we only have 2 daycares that are smaller than that. And that doesn't mean that they can't. It just means that we're not going to be requiring it. The state doesn't require it. So.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Yeah, that was a lot to go through. I mean, no doubt.
Sorry. It's
No.
3 years of
Yeah, absolutely. But I remember
information.
reading through stuff here. There's red stuff that's hacked out, and this is hacked out. So I really appreciate this, right? Because that really helps going through the packet that you give. I'm like, something really started clicking in place. So thank you for providing this and for the packet that we had. That's great. Yeah, I don't have any other questions. I do want to put this on the regular agenda though, because I do think.
It has to be on the
Yeah.
regular agenda. It's a code amendment.
Oh, well, great. There we go. Perfect.
Same as the next item. So I had another question then. So currently you said there's only 2 daycares that aren't licensed. How do we know about those if they don't go through the process?
So they are licensed. They just have 5. They have 5 or fewer children in their facility. So currently they're licensed as a family daycare. Under this new code, they wouldn't have to be.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of why we are proposing this, is because it is so hard. We rely a lot on neighbors notifying us. We had an incident where we were notified because the police were called, where these smaller in-home daycares, they don't know about the city code. They don't know it's a requirement to have a license. And so situations like that, it's harder.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
I think the question is if we want to give it a recommendation when moving it on or not.
I'm not opposed to it, but I don't know that I'm in a position where I want to recommend it yet either. I want to hear more discussion from our council members, because it's not something we're really allowed to talk about, right? And so I would like to have our discussion, again, not against it at all, but I'm not in a position to be like, yep, let's just go forward with a yay or a nay. I really want to hear more and hear this again and digest it more and let the public have a chance to talk to us more on it as well.
Yeah.
Feel good about that too.
So it can go on the agenda and then we can have a discussion then.
We just don't put a recommendation on
Yeah.
it.
It
Or
can go on the
for or
regular
against.
agenda without a recommendation
Great.
from this committee.
I'd feel better about that.
I
Just,
think that sounds great. Thank you both so much.
yeah, thanks a lot.
And that brings us to our next item, number 5, proposed amendments to taxi cab licensing requirements with Captain Dollinger again.
Yes, and I don't have a wonderful little presentation. I do apologize, but mine's a little more straightforward. So we took a look at the taxi ordinance around the same time we've been looking at all of these things. And you'll notice there's, again, a lot of red ink on this document. But the bottom line is we were, number one, changing the verbiage in there from having the city clerk being responsible for the licensure and transferring that to the police department, which we've basically been doing for some time. But we just want to update that. The other thing is based off a recommendation from our insurance carrier. We wanted to raise the amount of insurance that taxi cabs would be required to have. That's just kind of bringing that up to standard as well, especially with, I think they were comparing us towards Pullman and what kind of levels they had over there. So most of this red ink is basically just trying to more or less clean up the verbiage. All of these listed offenses that are disqualifiers are still a part of the code. We're just merely bringing it down to see this entire code for if any of these things. So we're not having to list out every single thing. And then if the legislature comes up with, another code, we don't have to add it in. It's just enumerated in that code section. With the exception of one offense that we did add, and that was 18-4116. That's indecent exposure. We felt that that was an appropriate disqualifier from having someone driving people around in a taxi.
Couldn't agree more.
Yes.
So, and that actually came about.
Because of a
be-
background.
because of-
Sure, yep, I'm sure.
Yeah, we didn't have that to disqualify them, so.
And thus, we don't have a PowerPoint presentation.
Correct.
We get it.
Yep, yep.
Yep. So anyway, that is the nuts and bolts of the changes there. I open it up to any questions if you have them.
The only question, and I started to look this up and then got distracted and didn't get back to it, sorry. But what is considered a taxi cab? When is it a taxi cab? When is it just paying someone to give you a ride somewhere?
So the Idaho legislature a couple of years ago changed that. I can't remember the name of the title. But there's a special code in the Type 49 code that covers the rideshare
Okay.
companies such as Lyft, Uber, all of those. Those are in that legislation. It did not allow for cities and counties to regulate those at all. So that we don't have the authority to do that. So this is simply taxi cabs.
Great, okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
No,
I don't think I have any either.
I'm happy to recommend this one for approval.
That works for me too.
All right, regular agenda with recommendation for approval.
Great. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Any staff reports today, Tyler?
We have none, Madam Chair.
All right, then I think we're ready to conclude.
I'm ready.
So adjourned.